let's go ahead. I'm gonna get to this what the actual title now. What we're talking about. I just wanted to give you that backdrop just to prepare you what we're about to go to. So you see the heading here: programming the black male mind. And so we're gonna switch to something. This was in. Make sure this I'm in the right place here, you guys. Hold on for just a second here. This was an article that I found. It's an old magazine. Let me see if they have the date here. It's probably not here. You know what? It's at the beginning, and this PDF that you see in front of you it's huge. Okay, so for me, if I page back, I'm gonna lose my place, and I don't want to do that. Okay, but this Collier's magazine, you can just Google it and you'll find it. It's an old magazine. I'm pretty sure they're not even around anymore, but it was present in that time. But anyway, this was, I would imagine, I think it was like in the early 1900s, if I remember correctly. I'm not going to read this whole thing in front of you, but I'm just going to read this section. This section here, if you look at here, it says, "Who killed Margaret Lear?" And it's talking about, this section is talking about the liquor industry. Okay, and they're talking about a particular murder case that took place. But in the process of them talking about this murder case where a black man killed a white woman, they're going to start giving some other information. And how I came across this, I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But let me go ahead and read. I'm trying to see exactly where it is so I can stay on point. Okay, I'll just start with this paragraph, and then I'll move down. But I'm not, like I said again, don't worry, I'm not gonna read all this. Okay. They arrested the Negro, got him in jail before the mob gathered. The governor of Louisiana, anxious to save the name of the state, poured company after company of militia into Shreveport. The town rested under martial law for 9 days, in which time the state tried and executed Coleman legally. Okay. It is one thing to theorize, it's another thing. And this is where they're going to start getting into some stuff. Okay. It is one thing to theorize, it's another thing to live through such an outrage in your own community. You and I might not have been in that mob which howled for the blood of this poor black beast. He's supposed to be showing us sympathy and calling us a poor black beast. Coleman. But you and I cannot greatly blame the man who was in it, and yet the men who were in it, and yet who was the real murderer of Margaret Lear? What if he wears a white face instead of a black? What if he is joined with the Model License League to reform the liquor traffic? Would you grease a rope for him? And now this is what he was writing. This is a white man writing this stuff back then. Okay, now it's gonna get into deeper now. Okay, in every low Negro dive of the South, they sell certain. Listen, okay, listen, okay. In every low Negro dive of the South, they sell certain brands of gin, whose very names, for the most part, I cannot mention here. Obscene titles, obscene labels, advertised by suggestion, by double meanings, that these compounds contain a drug to stimulate the low passions which have made the race problem a dreadful thing in the South. These bottles do not contain what their labels imply. Chemical analysis showed that the mixture is only cheap blended gin with a slight infusion, in some cases, of a sweetening, which may be benectine. Benectine. I hope I'm saying that right. The viciousness lies in the double meanings, clear to every man who knows the Southern Negro, in the pictures of naked white women on the labels, in the greater obscenities. The suggestion that he do the suggestion that he do the nameless crime to avenge which the Southern white lynches and burns, um, is before every Negro consumer of the gin, of that gin. Okay, next paragraph. Lee LeVay and Company of 206 Market Street, St. Louis, makes a popular and widely sold brand. If I should give the name here or attempt to describe its label, this publication could not go through the mails. It states its purpose in plain words. Still more plain, the advertising cards which LeVay distributes by the tons through the Black Belt. In his factory at St. Louis, young girls paste those labels and pack those cards. LeVay is not the only one of his kind, though he is probably the worst. Let me see. Blumenthal, Bickert and Company, heavily involved in the South Carolina tangle, make a brand whose name is only a little less obscene than LeVay's only. There's no picture of a white woman on the label. They belong to the Model License League. Dreyfus Wheel, and that's another one. Dreyfus Wheel and Company of Padua. Hope I'm saying that. Kentucky manufactures Devil's Blend Endurance Gin, the only brand whose name I can give here, and it's only which compares with LeVay's for popularity. Dreyfus, Wheel, and Company are more restrained and clever in their work. The suggestions of their label are apparent only to those who know Southern Negro slang. The suggestions in their advertising cards and posters are only a little more open. But Devil's Island Endurance is sold in the low dives of all the Black Belt of the Carolinas to Louisiana and Mississippi, and usually with representations as its purpose. Dreyfus Wheel and Company know that, and they pander to it. All right, and I can go on with this article, but I just wanted to get the main point there. So, what you just heard there is that they mentioned at least two to three companies that make liquor. They package it. First of all, they make liquor. They sell exclusively to black people, particularly black men. In addition to that, what else do they do? They put pictures of naked white women on the bottle. So you got naked white women on the bottle, then you have a cheap gin that's sweet. And they package this and they send it to specifically to black men all throughout the South. And what pictures they put on there, like I said again, they put pictures of naked white women. Okay? And so let's go ahead and there's another reading. You think that's bad, okay? This is another book I have. I don't have it on the screen because it's just in the actual paper book I'm having, and it's very short. It's shorter than actually what I read here. And this is a book called Jews and Booze. It's by Jewish author Marnie Davis, Becoming American in the Age of Prohibition. And so there's a section here where she talks about, and she's kind of mild, but in this particular section, and it's funny because if you go on YouTube, you will actually see her, she gives a lecture on this book. And throughout the whole lecture, she doesn't mention this part, what I just read to you, okay? The part I just read. But what I'm going to read now is a section out of her book. It's a short section, okay? So she's talking about Atlanta and how the Jews were were in the saloon business down in Atlanta. If you're familiar with Atlanta, it's on Decatur, like Decatur Street, where Sweet Auburn Avenue is, around that area. That area used to be lined up with nothing but saloons. All right, so here we go. And this is what she says, and then what I'm going to read after this is because what she says here is mild, and then the reading after this is going to be more direct. Okay, so this is what she says. Of the 220 businesses on Decatur Street between Pryor and Monroe in 1905, 76 or more than a third were Jewish owned. 13 Jews owned shoe repair stores, 12 ran clothing shops, and 7 were pawnbrokers. So you got the pawn shops. Now, remember the pawn shops? You know, we got all these pawn shops here. You see that? So, anyway, a few Russian Jews set up shop as grocers, one as a barber and another as a tobacconist. But the most common occupation for Jewish entrepreneurs on Decatur Street by far was saloon keeper. In 1905, 25 Jewish immigrants ran or worked in Decatur Street saloons. And Jewish immigrants constituted half of the saloon keepers on the strip. Some of these saloons were designated colored only, while others were open only to white clientele. For all these men, it was as plain as day that the street's business climate made opening a saloon an obvious choice. Saloon keeping was an entrepreneurial opportunity they had grabbed because the product sold well in the neighborhood. Okay, so that's what that's how she puts it. Now, there's a book here. It's called Following the Color Line, and it was written back again in the this is a book that was also written back in the early 1900s, and it's a book that you won't. I don't believe you will find it on Amazon. I actually found it on archive.org, fortunately, and I found the full book. And so this is not a book you can buy, but if you look for it's an old out of print book, and they give even more info here. So let me see here. Just give me just a moment. All right, here we go. All right, so what you see here, if you can see this, let me see if I can move this up here. Okay. So what you see in front of you, let me see if I can, let me scroll up a little bit. So sorry, y'all. I'm trying to adjust this a little bit here so it can at least be on the screen, and you can make it bigger and all that, at home. Okay, so what you see here, you see these two images here. Okay, so the one on the top, clearly, these are both saloons in Atlanta back in the day. The one on the top, it says whites only. The one on the bottom, it says colored only. And let me read you the subtitle under it, or the caption under it. It says, showing how the color line was drawn by the saloons in Atlanta, Georgia. Many of the saloons for Negroes were kept by foreigners, usually Jews. So again, this book that was written in the early 1900s, this was the person that wrote this book. He was a journalist that was, I guess, assigned or whatever to Atlanta because Atlanta had just had a big old race riot, and he just wanted to come down. He wrote a book on his observations of the color line down in Atlanta, and so what you're seeing here is that you see two saloons, and both of these saloons, if you read some of this book like I did, you'll find out that both saloons, Jews own both the white saloons and the black saloons. They own both sides. They were equal opportunity opportunists, so they own both of them. Now you may say, well, okay, well they own that. All right, so let's go a little bit further because there's a characteristic about this saloon or about this particular colored saloons that you're going to find pretty interesting. So let me go to that page. Okay, here we go. So on page 57, 5 days before the riot of last September, a committee of the city council visited some 40 saloons one afternoon and by actual count found 2,455 Negroes and 152 white men drinking at the bars or lounging around the doorways. In some of these saloons, conducted by white men and permitted to exist by the city authorities, pictures of nude white women were displayed as an added attraction. Has this anything to do with the Negro crimes against white women? After the riots, these conditions in Atlanta were much improved, and in January 1908, all these saloons were closed. Did you just hear that? So what he's basically saying here again is that in these saloons, and particularly in the black saloons, what do we see again? Pictures of naked white women on the walls. Now, why would they do something like that? And as I read earlier, you saw that you heard about how these same people, again, Jews, as in the book we just read, it said Jews ran, like I said, that first book I read, The Jews and Booze, she was pretty mild. This book that was written back in the early 1900s, he basically was saying Jews ran actually most of the saloons. And as we read in there, he said basically in the colored or in the black saloons, they would also put pictures of naked white women. Go back to the first thing that I read in Collier's, they said they would put pictures of naked white women on the liquor bottles. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this. What I'm doing here is, if you guys have ever done this, I know I think about puzzles. Like the actual puzzles you put together. Man, you don't see people doing it anymore. I remember my aunt. She used to get those 1,000-piece puzzle kits, and I just like I don't know how she does that or has the patience to do it, but she would do it. She loved it. Um, on me on the other hand, my mom would buy me like like the kid puzzles, that had like 20 pieces to it or whatever. But it was something about when as you were putting the puzzles together, you begin to see some patterns. You begin to see, okay, well, those are the trees over there. Okay, so so now that I got the tree section, what I need to look for are the other tree pieces, and I'm able to fit those. Okay, well, that's a lake, that's water. Okay, let me find all the pieces that have that blue in it, and I can fit that. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because what we're doing in this presentation, what I'm doing, is that I'm just laying out these puzzle pieces. And what you're going to begin to see as I'm talking, you're going to start seeing some patterns, and I'm pointing out the patterns for you. And so that's what we're doing. We're pointing out the patterns. And so let's put this together now. And when I say as I'm pointing out the patterns, now some of these things, it may not be a silver bullet, like absolutely 100% documented. I got this. I'm saying some of these things up to this point, it's documented and I showed it to you. But like for example, here, what we do know, and so as we're laying out these puzzle pieces, if you do a search for alchemy, alchemy is basically it's an ancient practice basically where you take, you're mixing things like chemicals and things of that nature. I'm just being very like broad in that definition. Basically, they use it. It can be anything from spells and all kind of stuff that go with it. It's a very spiritual practice, alchemy. It has very spiritual origins. If you go to the Jewish encyclopedia, they are very detailed and talk quite extensively about that. Well, when you think about alcohol falls under alchemy. It's a part of alchemy. It's a chemical. And when you think of the fact that you consider that, okay, fact that, and when you start studying, like I said, you go into the Jewish encyclopedia, they talk quite extensively about alchemy and the practice of it. When you go and you look at what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought on that. Okay, so you got that. Then you have the combination of that with images. Now let's think about this for a sec. When someone is intoxicated and you're constantly putting images in their minds, like what these Jews did with black men, that wasn't accidental, you guys. That wasn't coincidental. That was intentional. And we're going to, on the next couple of pages here, we're going to get to the root. We're going to start hearing even more why it was intentional. The one thing I want you to think about, though, is that when you think about Jewish culture, when it comes to, they may like hanging around black folks sometime, but when it comes down to marrying us, that kind of stuff, procreating with us, that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But why is it such this push to get us to lust after white women? Why is that? Okay, I want to get you thinking. So the combination of alcohol, flooding us with alcohol, flooding us with white images of what naked white women. What you're doing is that you are psychologically programming people. That's what you're doing when you're doing that intentionally. Like I said, you putting naked white women on liquor bottles. You putting naked white women on walls in the saloon, and all these guys are intoxicated. That's all they see. Guess what they're gonna want? That's a program. That's deliberate, and that's demonic and evil when you think about it. Let me get to my next point. Specifically targeted black men with something they knew the black man, could not have, or really didn't even want, but would want under an altered state. Like I just said, black men, all we knew, African people of African descent, all we knew was our women, our black women, and it was all about survival mode. But you think about this for a sec. Let me continue to read what I wrote here. Since the days of slavery, the white woman was always paraded, I should say, in front of the black man as a prize that he could not have. They, white women, were well kept, clean, treated as queens, and treated as queens. In contrast, the image of the black woman was ruined by the demands of slavery. In addition, the white man consistently reinforced to the black man that the black woman was to be seen only as a sex object, as she would be subjected to constant rape by slave masters. So you keep the reinforcement on the plantation constantly. Who are the beautiful women that you see on the plantation? They're the white women. It's the master's wife. Those are the beautiful women. They were smelling good, had their makeup, had their hair done and all that stuff. And then you look at the black women, they in the fields, they sweating and working right alongside you. And sure got probably an attitude just like the men had attitudes. I mean, you in the field sweating, it ain't gonna be a joyful time. You know what I'm saying? You're in slavery. So the only visual you have of your black woman is at her worst. But the only visual you have of white women was at their best. And you're constantly being told, well, you can't touch them. You can't touch a white woman. You can't touch a white woman. Well, what are you going to think? What do you think human nature is going to say? Human nature is going to say, like, it's the whole, the whole scenario. Like, if you put a don't touch wet paint sign on a bench, what are people going to do? They're going to touch it. So even at that stage in on a plantation, we were being fed to discount our women, but to high value the white woman. And that was constantly being reinforced. And then you had, on top of that, you had these Jews that were feeding into that with the alcohol, the liquor, with throwing these, forcing, flooding our living areas, our communities with alcohol, and putting pictures of naked white women on them, and then say, well, if that wasn't bad enough, then go to the saloon. You surrounded with more pictures of naked white women, constantly, over and over and over again. What do you think is going to happen? So over time, what do you see? So let's continue here with the next slide. Let's see. Next title of this one, well, the heading on this one says reinforcement and why. And I'm gonna read this article. It's entitled. Now you're gonna really get something out of this one. Okay, read the article, "The Hidden Agenda Behind Interracial Pornography." Okay, we're gonna get in, and I'm gonna skip over the parts that are kind of stank, y'all. But but this article, because I've done a lot of research just in this area as well. When I say research, I mean I ain't talking about looking at a bunch of naked women. I don't do that kind of stuff, but more on the business side, and just really understanding who runs it and all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, this particular article I found to be very, very good, and it was the author. he did a great job in compiling all of it within one article. So that's when I found this. I was like, man, awesome. I don't have to be pulling from all these different resources. So anyway, you see the title, the hidden agenda behind interracial pornography. All right. So I'm gonna kind of highlight some of the areas. You're gonna hear me kind of skipping over some stuff. So, but I'll focus on mainly the parts that are I think are very relevant to what we're talking about. With let me see, let me see here. All right. They sent more hate than usual on social media, focused on graphic images on black on white gang rapes, not depicted in the present article. That was extracted from a pornographic films with lines along your girl's. Okay, basically what he's saying in this particular passage is this right here is he was talking about how um, let me just add a little bit more to what he's saying in this particular section here that I just highlighted. I deselected it, and now we're going to get this is going to get more into geopolitical stuff. So, but I'm not going to get too much into that. But if you notice, like over in Europe, you have what you have this immigration issue that's been going on. Let's focus on Germany, just for example. I'm gonna be real quick on this, y'all. In Germany, you have this flood of African immigrants and Arab immigrant or not Arab, like people from the Middle East that are coming and flooding places like Germany and some of the other European countries. Well, Germany, what Germany's been doing is actually encouraging sex between these immigrants and their white women. They've been encouraging it. If you do a Google search, you'll find that the government has been handing out cards on how to have sex with our white women. I'm not making this up. But who's fueling these things? Again, the politicians. When you look at some of the people who are fueling these things, a lot of these politicians are also Jews. So again, so I want you to bookmark that. But I just wanted to kind of throw that, okay? So let me see here. So as I detailed in a previous article, every man has the sacred right to prefer one's woman over another based on what attracts him. But the fact of the matter, but the fact that the media fuels the anti-white sentiment is where I draw the line. Any man hates the idea that his right to breed will be stolen by another. There is another primal dimension in this hate, but the overrepresentation of black men on white girls in the media is fairly recent, especially in porn. Jews have a disproportionate role in the production of pornography, in general. Here's a list of Jews who own the main pornographic networks. Vivid, the largest porn site in the world, ran by Steve Hirsch and Bill Asher. Both of them are Jews. AVN Media, Paul Fishbein, Irv that's Slifkin, Barry Rosenblatt, PMG Inc., Charles Prast, Spiegler Girls, owned by Mark Spiegler, also the owner of pedophile website NAMBLA.org. So these are the main websites, pornographic companies, and they're all owned by Jews. And not only that, there's a push that they have towards pushing interracial pornography, where you have this oversexed man that's just constantly having his way with these white girls. So as we'll continue, I'll just read. But it's interesting to observe that almost all the distributors and creators of interracial porn are Jewish. Okay? And it's the name of a company. It's called Dog Fart. That's crazy. But anyway, Dog Fart, owned by Cable Rosenberg, a site that promotes scene whatever sessions, and then he describes the different stuff or whatever. There's another service, I think it's called Squeeze Me, the Netflix of porn, owned by Mark Colich, offers racist celebs the chance to star in interracial porn. And then there's another one called Blacked, owned by Greg Lansky from France. So again, all these sites specifically. So not only in the porn world, just pornography in general, Jews run that, but the the pages that specify in interracial porn, interracial mainly meaning black men with white women, are all also owned by Jews. Now you see this here. I'm just pointing this out, laying the puzzle pieces down. And they talk about someone who made this person who made a fortune through three websites. Let me see here, because this article is very raw, so I'm just kind of skimming through it real quick and trying to decide should I even read some of this stuff. Um, yeah, basically some of the things that's in that article there, and in that paragraph, he talks about how they specify in, of course, black men, and then they will find white girls and try to make them look young, like little girls. And then whatever type of sex is out there, they have them engaging in that. And so that's what they do. So I just kind of generalize that because, like I said, again, this article is pretty raw. Um, let's see here. Let's see. And it's going to be a lot in this particular video. You hear me saying, let's see, and all that quiet. Because this one, I have to really kind of make sure I'm not, because some stuff in here is kind of like, ooh, I don't want to read that. Let me see. Okay, so they mentioned this guy Lansky. Um, they say he's in cahoots with another fake news website, The Daily Beast, who celebrates his work through writer Aurora Snow, a porn star who apparently built her career in interracial porn, as her subpar looks make her do scenes that other girls could decline. It tells you the care the Daily Ham Beast takes into choosing who writes their articles. Lansky explains, and we don't care about that part there I just read. I'm trying to see here because there was another part I wanted to get here. Hold on, I'm gonna skip. Okay, let me just read this here too. Okay, so and this is going to address what I said as far as the why. Okay, why are they doing this? And this particular guy, he addresses it. I said, what do Jews have to say about these accusations, as far as the accusations which are accurate that they own and run pornography? The only reason that Jews, now listen to this very closely, you guys. The only reason that Jews are in pornography is that we think that Christ sucks. Catholicism sucks. We don't believe in authoritarianism. Hope I'm saying that right. Pornography thus becomes a way of defiling Christian culture, and as it penetrates to the very heart of the American mainstream, and is no doubt consumed by those very same sexual perverts. It says its subversive character becomes more charged. And the guy that said this is Al Goldstein, and he was a publisher of a porn magazine. I don't know if it's still in existence, but basically, if you scroll down here, this video, I may have excerpted this video on another video I did some time ago, and I don't know if I uploaded to YouTube yet, but I will. I think I did. I'm not sure. But these two guys here are Jewish. And if you listen to this video, it's also on YouTube. They are very open, and they tell you just about, they lay it all out. Yep, Jews do run pornography, and this is why we do it. And so that's an interesting video to check out. Now, this is the last part here of the article I want to quote here. They're talking about actresses that refuse to do scenes with black men. All right, okay, so female performers frequently agree to do a scene and then back away when they discover that he plans to have them on camera with a person of color. It's irritating and disgusting and annoying, and it creates a huge problem with casting, he says. I end up in these situations with agents where I'm trying to plan a scene and I have to say, okay, one girl will be having sex with all the men and one girl will only have sex with the white men, because there are women who have never had sex with a black man on camera and want to be paid $500 extra for it, as if it is a chore. It's racist and belittling, and it's keeping me from making a good product, and it's hurting good performers like Mickey Mod. Um, let's see. It was one because I don't. Okay, yeah, there's a lot in there. Okay, so in an interview with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, James Dean said about Jews and porn. Haaretz, do you happen to have any Jewish role models or figures in the industry? Dean, I do not go into a place and think I'm Jewish. Who else is Jewish? I need to work with them. Respect goes universally across all races, creeds, colors, religions, everything. The Jews know that we're better than everyone else. That's all that matters. You hear that? Haaretz, that's going to be a blow up quote in this article. And Dean laughs. It's true. We're the chosen people. It's a fact. That's what he says. All right. Nathan Abrams, Jewish professor at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, narrows down the rule that Jews and pornography of the Jews and pornography. Jews are the driving force behind the modern pornography industry, and their motivation in part is to destroy Gentile morals. Pornography thus becomes a way of defiling Christian culture, and as it pertains, I said penetrates, as it pertains to the very heart of the American mainstream, and is no doubt consumed by those very same sexual perverts. Its subversive character becomes more charged, extending the subversive thesis. Jewish involvement in the X-rated industry can be seen as a proverbial two fingers, middle finger for the American readers and to the entire sexual pervert establishment in America. Um, Jewish involvement in porn, by this argument, is the result of a atavistic hatred of Christian authority. They are trying to weaken the dominant culture in America by moral subversion. All right. Let's see. And you hear all that, right? I told you, they're just putting it all out there. And I think, skip that. Let me see. And there's a lot more in here. I think that was it for the time being, and I think I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot more, and I'll have a link to that video. I mean, I'm sorry, a link to that article below this video, so you can, if you want to read it, you can. But like I said, there's some terminology in there I didn't want to include, but they're just very wrong. They just, again, they're just telling you straight up. They're telling you straight up what they're about. And the reason why I explored that, I wanted us to explore that together, is because pornography, of course, is sex, and drawing a line right back to what we were talking about earlier about these naked women on these liquor bottles who control the liquor industry. And as for black people, it was Jews who the saloons, who controlled the saloons in places like Atlanta. It was Jews. They owned the saloons. And in addition to owning the saloons, they would put pictures of naked white women on there. I think I just said that black people own the liquor industry. No, it was Jews that owned the liquor industry, and they were flooding our men constantly with this lust, for trying to get us programmed to lust after white women. And they were just doing that through liquor. And now, as I just pointed out, they're doing that in pornography. Well, let's go ahead and continue. Let me see the next one here. Well, if you look at today, I used to kind of like say, you see interracial couples, and, and in sports, and it's like every now and then, you see, it's like, oh, okay, maybe they just kind of met or whatever. But I have come to the conclusion, and I came to this conclusion actually a long time ago. I said, there is something about this. It's it's just way too coincidental. It reminds me of Children of the Corn almost. If y'all remember that movie, Children of the Corn, it's like, okay, you see one blonde haired kid, all right, that's something. All right, you see two, all right. And they all got the little bob haircuts or whatever. Okay. You see three, Okay, let me think about that. Then doggone it, you start seeing a whole bunch of them. It's like, okay, let me go ahead and pack my bags because something ain't right up in here. And their eyes start glowing too. Oh, I'm way up out of here. Okay. So I'm saying that to be funny, but when you look at it's very interesting. And it's something that, again, we cannot dismiss when you look at the sports world and look at these athletes, and you can identify some of these. Now, some of these, I'm just tell you straight up, some of these people, they have broken up with whoever they are on these pictures here. I think Tiki Barber here, I think he broke up, but there's a history. But some of these people who broke up with these women that they're hugged up with, they're joined up with some other white women. And it's like, and again, as far as my own personal views about interracial marriage, I'm gonna talk about that on a later. There's some people that will want to send you straight to hell over that. I don't necessarily believe that at all. Okay, but again, that's a topic I want to kind of cover scripturally and all that stuff in a later video. But for the time being, I will say this: nobody's gonna go to hell because they married in an interracial marriage. I do not believe that at all. Okay. So with that being said, what I'm saying is, as it pertains to this video and this topic, it's something very unusual about this heavy concentration of interracial marriages or interracial dating that takes place in the sports world. And we're just saying just sports world on this slide. Because it's just, okay, you tell me ain't no black women, you can't meet any black women at all? What's going on? And that's what I wrote here. I said many of the most highest paid or most talked about athletes have either white or light skinned wives or partners. And it's not just in the sports industry, but it's also in media, like in the movies. You see Key and Peele. I think one of these, I think he Peele or Key, whatever, whoever this one is, I think he just recently broke up with his wife. But there's so many others here, as you can see. If it's not white, they're Asian. But again, what I'm saying is, and again, if you're listening, I'm not. What I'm saying is that it's to have this high concentration of interracial marriages and dating in one concentrated area. There's something very strange, I should say, about that, and it's not something for me. I'm not going to just easily just dismiss it. Oh, it just happens. No, it doesn't. Just not in that concentrated space. There's what is driving that. What's going on? You know what I'm saying? And because you and I in everyday America, we don't. I mean, you see interracial dating, but it's not like on your street, for example, half your street is interracial. I mean, what's the chances of that happening? Do you understand what I'm saying? But when you look in Hollywood or you look in the sports world, it's almost like all brothers got a white woman on the side or Asian woman on the side or a Latina on the side. So the concentration of it is when I see that, I'm like, okay, this is not even a coincidence. What's up with this? Okay. So anyway, let me get to this next slide here. Just wanted to kind of have those pictures there so you can see that. And you guys kind of know what I'm my point and what I was talking in those slides. So let's look at this next slide. And then the title of this one, I said the new plantation owners and programmers. Well, guess who owns the sports world? And not just the sports world. I'm gonna get into this in a moment, but I'm gonna read these two quotes that I got, and guess who runs the media? Okay, so let's start with Joel Stein. This is LA Times. This is an article he did in 2008, and the title of the article is "Who Runs Hollywood." Let me just read to you real quick what he's had to say about Hollywood. Again, these people they tell you straight up. This ain't no like hidden conspiracy and that. They tell you. Okay, how deeply Jewish is Hollywood? When the studio chiefs took a full-page ad in the Los Angeles Times a few weeks ago to demand that the Screen Actors Guild settle in contract, the open letter was signed by News Corp President Peter Chernin, Jewish, Paramount Pictures Chairman Brad Gray, Jewish, Walt Disney Co. Chief Executive Robert Iger, Jewish, Sony Pictures Chairman Michael Linton, surprise, Dutch Jew, Warner Brothers Chairman Barry Meyer, Jewish, CBS Corp executive Leslie Moonves, so Jewish. His great uncle was the first prime minister of Israel. MGM chairman Harry Sloan, Jewish, and NBC Universal chief executive Jeff Zucker, mega Jewish. If either of the Weinstein brothers had signed this group, I'm sorry, if either of the Weinstein brothers had signed, this group would have not only been had the power to shut down all the film production, but to form a minivan with enough Fiji water on hand to fill a mikvah. You hear that? He's saying that basically they had the power to shut down Hollywood. So I've taken it upon myself to reconvince America that Jews run Hollywood by launching a public relations campaign because that's what we do best. I'm weighing several slogans, including Hollywood, more Jewish than ever. Hollywood from the people who brought you the Bible. You hear that? And Hollywood, enjoy. If you enjoy TV and movies, then you probably like Jews after all. And that's what he said, okay, in talking about how Jews really run Hollywood. They don't just run Hollywood, they really run Hollywood. And again, this is going back again. If you listen to a lot of the discussions we have, well, there ain't enough black representation in Hollywood. Why is that? See, it's those white executives. It's those white executives. You know how we keep saying that? They ain't just white people, they're Jews. And again, we need to start identifying and calling it out for what they are. These are Jews. Okay, so let's go to the next quote. Josh Nathan Kazes, of forward.com. He wrote an article, this was back in 2014. It's called Why Are There So Many Pro Basketball Owners Jewish? Now, check this out. I just talked about the media world. Let's talk about the sports world. There are only 3 Jewish players in the NBA and no Jewish head coaches, yet nearly half the principal owners of NBA teams are Jewish. As the league's current commissioner and his immediate past commissioner, no other major pro league in the United States has such a high proportion of Jewish owners. The NFL comes the closest. Roughly a third of the league's owners are Jewish. Just a handful of pro baseball and hockey owners are Jewish. Now, I want you to we'll stop there for a second, okay? Now, you remember what I said earlier in this presentation? I said about identity thieves. And what identity thieves like to do is they want to make sure they stay in close proximity of you because they want to make sure they don't get found out. They don't want to make sure they don't get. So what are they going to do? They're going to control the narrative. They're going to make sure they stay very close to you. So isn't it interesting that the sports of NBA or professional basketball, professional football, they just so happen to have a high concentration of Jewish owners. But then when you start looking at baseball or NHL hockey, not so much. You don't see too many Jews there. But they just so happen to be in the very same sports that blacks, where you find a high concentration of black folks. Now, doesn't that sound exactly like the plantation that I described earlier in this presentation? Oh, it doesn't stop there. Let's continue. Jews also make up a significant percentage of sports writers and broadcasters. So they also control the narrative. That also includes Colin Kaepernick. Okay, so many, not all of them, but many of the sports writers and broadcasters, if you start looking, do a Google search, that's all you got to do. If you think I'm making this up, all I'm asking you to do is to do a search for yourself, and you will see that a high percentage of these sports writers are also Jewish. And as I just said earlier, by being a sports writer, what does that do? You control the narrative. And as I just mentioned, Colin Kaepernick. Well, let me just be real quick with Colin Kaepernick. I felt when that started bubbling up that was all a psyop. And the reason why I say that, and I'm not going to rabbit trail too much on this, is because they realize, they meaning those that control NFL, they realize that, hey, listen, we're losing viewers. And so what they did was, so what basically happens, all of a sudden Colin Kaepernick comes along, I'm going to put my knee down and I'm going to basically protest and all that. We're going to create this division, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, right? Well, of course he did that. And yes, it did have an impact on white viewers. But what did it also do? it began to rally a lot of black folks around him. And what were the black folks saying? Now, some of the things they were saying, it's interesting to listen to. Well, yeah, the NFL is nothing but one big slave plantation. But at the same time, we're going to protest until he gets on the team. Well, why do you want to put him on the team in the first? If the NFL is a plantation, why are you trying to put him back on the team? And is that what he really wants? But what did it do in the meantime? I'm telling you, the mind tricks that happens here. With Colin Kaepernick, when you looked at all those protests, again, do a Google search and look at some of the protests. What are most of the protesters wearing? They're wearing Colin Kaepernick jerseys. And not just any jerseys, but who makes them? The NFL. So look how much money the NFL made off of those protests. Everyone buying the Colin Kaepernick jerseys. So they was making money. But here's the other part of it. If Colin Kaepernick was to ever get picked up by an NFL team, he's going to bring in so many people back to the NFL. I'm talking about particularly black folks. He's going to bring in a lot of people to the NFL. Now, is it going to be enough to make a difference in the low viewership? I'm not going to say that. I don't necessarily think so. But I do believe that somewhere down the line, that if he were to be brought back on a team, all these black folks who repeatedly was calling the NFL saying that it's one big plantation and all this stuff, all of a sudden now they're gonna be the main ones. We gotta buy up season tickets because see, we gotta support our own. He was there for us. We gotta be there for him on the sidelines. And the NFL, all these Jewish owners, they're gonna be sitting back laughing at y'all. But that's how it works. And so again, the sports writers, the owners, all a good percentage of them are all Jewish, and they're controlling the narratives, even these racial narratives. They're controlling all of that because it gets you talking. That's why ESPN, for example, they engage in some of these controversial topics. Why? Because it gets you talking. Especially when you start talking racial stuff, we're gonna get all clicking and passing along links and all that stuff, and they're getting paid with every click that we pass along. They control the narrative. So these Jews have figured out how they can make money even off of our anger. Even off of our anger, they're still making money. So anyway, and it gets even deeper, you guys. The old plantation, this is all related, and this is part 2 of that slide. The old new plantation owners and programmers continued. Did you know that the show Mad Men was basically about Jews? Well, if you do a search on this, again, as you see this article, Mad Men, one of the most Jewish shows on television. Mad Men, if you're not aware, I'm sure, and there's very few people out there who aren't, was basically about the advertising industry in New York back in the day. And they showed like the whole, like, in the early days up until I think it went to like the 70s or so. And, but it was based off of Jews. Jews played a significant role in the advertising industry. There's a book, I have it here, let me reach for it. You may want to do a search for this book. It's called Jewish Mad Men, Advertising and the Design of the American Jewish Experience. Do a search on that book. And they talk about, again, how Jews played a significant role. Again, they try to play it down and say, oh, it was just a few of us. Jews play a significant, major role in advertising. And also, as you can see here, that means that they also controlled the narrative, even in what we saw. So as you see on the right here, you see the mammy here, the black mammy here. Eyes in town, honey. They got her there, and then they got these white men in black faces here, basically. Well, it's a high probability. Guess who were behind the advertisements of these ads here? Jews. Because they're telling you, Mad Men is like, oh yeah, Mad Men's cool show. I like the clothes and all that stuff. They're telling you it was about Jews and how Jews played a significant role in the ad world. So if they played a significant role in the ad world, that means they had power on these images of us, of black people. Meantime, they putting images of white women out looking like this. So again, if you're being constantly bombarded with images like this, guess who you gonna gravitate towards? You're gonna gravitate towards this. And many times it's again targeted towards black men. All right, let's get to the next slide here. And on this slide here, you see, and sometimes the plantation owners had a little bit help. Everything you see here is from Johnson Publishing House. So starting here on the left-hand side, Johnson Publishing Company, they you had Ebony Magazine and you had Jet Magazine. These right here, if you look at the early issues of Ebony Magazine, if you go from the 60s, I would say all throughout the 60s, I forgot when the first issue was. I don't want to, I think it was somewhere in the 50s, but definitely in the 60s, and I would say maybe the late 50s. How about I say that? You'll find a lot of these ads here, y'all, of light skin lightening creams. I found some pages where they had two ads where it was skin light. I mean, they were pushing this stuff like crazy. Then you got the models. A lot of the models that they used, they were all light skin, if you remember. In the earlier Ebony magazines, Jet magazines, most of the models they used were light skin. And it's particularly in Jet magazine, you flip in the middle. Most of the centerfold models, light skin, light skin. And even I remember that even up to the 80s, you will see a lot of that. Now, somewhere down the line, they got some sense and it's like, okay, let's put some darker sisters up here. But for a long time, Johnson Publishing Company, they pushed that narrative of light skinned women. They said, well, we can't do white. Well, let's do light skinned women. They pushed that for a long time. You know, it's interesting because we always are wanting certain companies to apologize for things they did that was damaging to black folks. But it's interesting. I've never heard of Ebony and Jet magazine apologizing for this because this was quite damaging. This perpetuated what these Jews did back in the day and putting those constant images of lighter skinned women in front of us. That's what they did. And Johnson Publishing Company played a big role in that as well. So just something to think about.